Hello everyone, my name is Shiran from the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, and you are watching Red Mic on Aththa. Welcome, and please give a special welcome to our guest today, Her Excellency the Ambassador of Cuba to Sri Lanka, Patricia Lázara Pego Guerra. Welcome, Ambassador. Hope I pronounced your name correctly. I've been practicing that.
Perfect. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Thanks. We're so honored to have you here, and it's such a special time as well because today is the birthday of Fidel Castro, a great leader of Cuba, an icon, beacon of the global South, right? Also, on a more somber note, it is also a very difficult time for the Cuban people, a challenging time due to the embargo by the US, right, which is trying to suffocate the island. But we know the Cuban people resist. But before we get into all of that, you, I think, have been in Sri Lanka for less than a year. So I think I would really like to get to know you better, and I think our audience would also love to get to know you better. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came into this line of work, where you were before you were in Sri Lanka?
Yes, well, first, before answering the question, I would like to reiterate the gratitude of the embassy and my personal gratitude for the invitation to participate on this project, Red Micro. Today, as you mentioned, is a very special day. It's the 100th anniversary of the Fidel Castro's birth. So it's a coincidence. It's not a coincidence, but it's a beautiful coincidence in some way for me to be with you, sharing some ideas about Fidel Castro. So it's something that we highly appreciate. About how I came to diplomacy and my life, I come from a very humble family. I think that people who knows me, people who I talk on a daily basis, they understand why I'm so simple. I am just diplomatic and I'm an ambassador, but I always use the last name of a revolutionary ambassador. I mean, I am a simple person because my origin is humble. My family, my mother and my father, they were both workers, ordinary workers in a socialist Cuba. They had the opportunity to live before the revolution and after the revolution, so they were able to compare and to teach the children, I mean their sons and daughters. They were able to teach us to appreciate the benefits of the revolutionary process because they witnessed what Cuba was before and also what Cuba was after. So I feel very lucky and privileged to come from a family like the family I had. I used to play basketball, so many people don't know that. Well, some people see it because I'm tall.
Yes.
And because I love sports and I really enjoy, world championship in whatever sport is possible. It doesn't matter if it is football or basketball or athletic, whatever, I get there and I dream. I think sometimes that this is like a pending dream I have, participating in one Olympic Games. But this is something that maybe I have the chance in the rest of my life. But well, I used to play basketball. I was not so bad, but not so good, because I think I enjoy playing basketball, but I enjoy more studying. It was that kind of athlete that loved being with the ball, basketball, throwing balls, but also studying. So immediately when I was in junior high school and college, I decided, okay, well, basketball is part of my life, but I need to continue. So that's why I was approved. I make some exams, and I was approved to enter to the Higher Institute for International Relations in Cuba. It's the logical process the normal process to get into diplomacy in Cuba. Now this institute has a different name. It's a University of Diplomacy, of something similar. The name is Raúl Roa Garcia, who was one of the first diplomatics of the Cuban Revolution. It's famous. You wrote in Google Raúl Roa Garcia, and you will see how he handled to fight the imperialism at the United Nations in different languages. He was a master for all of us. That's why the institute was entitled with his name.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then, being in diplomacy, I studied, but as part of my preparation or formation, my training as diplomacy, I always wanted to continue studying and researching. That's why I got to a master degree program, and I went also to a PhD program. So this is Patricia. I have a daughter. I always say that it's probably the best of myself. I'm very proud of her. Of course, she's beautiful, but she's an excellent person, and she knows I love her, and I'm here. She's in Cuba now. In 2025, she graduated. In Cuba, we have this bachelor in the social communication. It's like community managers. So that's what she studied. She's the person who followed the social media for enterprises or private companies, for people in general. It's a very interesting and updated.
So she's a communicator, basically.
She's a communicator. Right. She's good. She loves what she does.
In some ways, quite similar to diplomacy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, managing relationships, communicating ideas.
Yes. She has the tools. From Havana University, she got the knowledge and the tools on how to do that. And this is also, at this moment in life, this so-called battle of ideas, mentioning Fidel, being a communicator is something very important for the revolutionaries, for the left, for the progressive and social movement, because we need to be there in the social media. If we underestimate the significance and the benefits of being active in social media, we are losing the battle.
We're losing, yeah. So
this career that this program of studies, degree that she selected, and she is graduated, it's very useful at this moment in life. That's more or less my life.
It's fascinating. I mean, already from your story, I think we can derive so much about the Cuban process, right? The fact that you had access to so much interesting educational opportunities, athletics, recreation, right? And also, I think there's an interesting pattern between your studies in diplomacy and the fact that you have a university dedicated to that subject, and then the next generation, your daughter learning communications, also tells us a lot about, I think, the situation that Cuba has been ever since the revolution, right? The importance of the battle of ideas, of communications, of diplomacy. But I mean, on that note, I was just thinking, I mean, you are here all the way in Sri Lanka. It's something like a 13-hour time difference, right, with Havana, where your daughter is. And I know it's a very difficult situation economically because the embargo under the Trump administration has been tightened, right? They're trying to suffocate Cuba. We see on the news that there has been blackouts for, hours on end. Can you tell us a little bit about what the situation on the ground is like in Cuba? I mean, how is everyday life affected? How are people dealing with the situation?
Yeah, the situation in Cuba is very difficult. I always say that this is probably the worst situation that we have had.
Worse than the collapse of the Soviet Union, you would say?
I think so, because during the collapse, comparing is not good sometimes, but during the collapse of the Soviet Union, we had Fidel. And we are celebrating today the 100th anniversary of his birth. But in those days, we had Fidel in the front of every battle that Cuba had, the Cuban people had. So that might be a different. Fidel was unique. Fidel was able to get together, to unite people that might have many differences. So in those moments, we felt like, we are safe because Fidel is here. It's something difficult to explain because life is life, and we are humans. We are born, we reproduce. We are born, we grow up, we reproduce, and we die. This is the cycle of life. If we don't understand that, we are lost. So it is necessary to understand that Fidel had a life, that he took advantage of a life. He created this socialist program in Cuba. He developed that. He gave his life for this. But he passed away. That's normal. So, but we were so lucky. We're so proud to have had Fidel in our life, to have had someone like him guiding us, teaching us how to think, how to see life, how to understand the different scenarios in the international arena, and of course inside Cuba. The blockade, it's a challenge. It's a daily challenge for Cubans. As I told you, this is probably the worst time because, for example, if we go back to history, there have been many difficult or very difficult periods and moments in the history of the Cuban Revolution. During the different U.S. administrations. It doesn't matter if they were Democrats or Republicans. Mm-hmm. The blockade is there because it is the nature of their relationship with Cuba. It's something historical, more than the current situation is something that goes back to history. At the beginning of the revolution, we had the cut of the sugar cane program. The U.S. has a quote of sugar cane that they used to buy to Cuba.
Right.
That was one of the first measures, sanctions that they did.
They banned the import of Cuban sugar.
Exactly. They stopped buying sugar cane from Cuba. Cuba, in that time, was a mono producer and mono exporter. Right. I mean, of sugar.
Its entire pre-revolutionary economy was structured on exporting sugar to the U.S.
We were a dependent country on sugar cane production. So that was like the first hit that we received. Then they also stopped selling fuel to Cuba. Imagine it's only 90 miles. Naturally and geographically, it's easy to understand and to assume that the U.S. could be the most important trade partner of Cuba. Because it's only, a flight is 40 minutes. In a ferry, there were many ferries before the revolution coming to Miami and going to Miami. In ferry, it could be 2 hours. So it's too close. Yes. So naturally, it could be the most important trade partner for Cuba, but it's not. It's the most important enemy of Cuba. It's a contrary. It's a contradiction. And then we have Bay of Pigs invasion. The first defeat to the U.S. imperialism in Latin America.
Incredible,
yes. We were led by someone like Fidel Castro. Then we have other U.S. administrations. We had Ronald Reagan. Very hard hand, very conservative, very anti-Cuban as well. We also have Bush, father, President Bush, father, and President Bush, son, I always remember this terrible Plan Bush. It was terrible. In that moment, we thought that could be the worst stage in the bilateral relation. But no, history was keeping something even worse for us some years later. We also have some Democrats. We have Jimmy Carter, with whom we had good relations. We established the diplomatic relation. We opened embassies. We also have President Clinton. But even with President Clinton, he was a Democrat. There were some approachments, bilateral approachment. President Clinton signed the Helms-Burton Act.
Right.
The Helms-Burton Act is very special. It's not a simple act against Cuba, because there are many acts against the Cuban Revolution. But this one is very special because this one is technically codified the blockade. It means that according to the U.S. law, the president is not allowed to lift the embargo. We know it is possible. We know that the president has the prerogative through executive orders. They can do whatever they decide because it's the president of the country. Mm-hmm. But according to that law, it's only the Congress. So unfortunately, in the Congress there are some Cubans who are very strong, big Cuban born. Right. Cuban Americans, congressmen and congresswomen, that they are very strong in Congress.
So the Cuban emigres, who are basically the Cuban elites, the landowning class who lost out during the revolution, their properties and so on, they are the ones who constitute this group in Congress that are against the Cuban Revolution.
Yes, and their power is based especially in the significance of Florida as a state.
Stronghold for the Republicans.
Exactly.
And Trump especially.
Exactly. In the presidential elections. Florida is a very important state. So that is the relationship between Congress and Florida and the Helms-Burton Act, signed by President William Clinton. After that, then we have, I told you, Bush son. We have Obama, President Obama. Mm-hmm. We have first mandate of President Donald Trump. Then we have President Biden, and now we have President Trump again, trying to do what he didn't do it before, trying to do what nobody did. He's very focused, accompanied by Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio, yeah.
They are both,
Rubio.
Yes, but they are both very focused. They are determined to suffocate Cuba until the point that they can witness the defeat of the Cuban Revolution. It's in a daily basis. It's every day, every week. There is a new threat. There is a new sanction. There is something to suffocate Cuba until the last possible breath of the Cuban people. You mentioned the lack of electricity. It's very sad because the day has 24 hours, but there are communities in Cuba, not only in the countryside, not only in the provinces, but also in the city, in the capital city. You can find communities and neighbors, without electricity for 20 hours, for 20-some hours.
20 hours?
20 hours out of 24. 2 weeks, last week or 2 weeks ago, the Cuban National Electrical System fall 3 times in a week because the structure of the Cuban National Electric System is old. The infrastructure, the right. Equipment, how to maintain, give maintenance, and so is all. The technology is based on the former socialist countries relationship that we had.
So it's probably very hard to find things like spare parts.
It's difficult to find, basically because of the blockade. Without fuel, It's difficult. Sometimes it's impossible. Well, we are doing our best. We are also. This is one of the most heroic lessons that we are having as Cubans and also for the world. It's so difficult to live in a daily base without fuel, and we are trying to do our best. We are resisting. We are living. If we can call this living, it's difficult to live like that without electricity, without fuel for public transportation. There is almost no public transportation in Havana.
Right.
Yeah.
What about the supply chains? I mean, for agricultural produce, the logistics must have also been severely strained by a lack of fuel.
That is also a problem we have, because it's like an economic chain. It's a chain. If you don't have fuel, you cannot take the, let's say, organic or non-organic products that you need in agriculture. If you don't have fuel, you cannot do the land work you need to produce in agriculture. If you don't have fuel, you cannot send those products, final products, from the countryside to the table of the Cubans. It doesn't matter if it is in the capital city, Havana, or in any other city in the country. So without fuel, it's complicated. Without fuel, it's difficult to work. Because if not public transportation, how do you get to work? So one of the solutions that we are trying to implement is the remote work. Many people are working from home.
From home, okay.
Or totally or partially. Sometimes they go to the office 2 or 3 times a week. The rest of the time they work from home. But it's difficult even to work from home. Remote work is difficult because if you don't have electricity, you cannot connect to internet, the phones. It doesn't work, do not work. So it's a challenging, daily challenge that we are facing in our common life. My daughter is in Cuba. Even when I am a diplomat and I have access to information, current information of what is happening in Cuba, I have that personal and daily feedback on what's happening in my own house. It's difficult. Usually in any country of the world, you can buy your food for a week. You keep the food in the frozen or in refrigerator. In Cuba, it's difficult. So many people are not doing that. Many people are cooking with coal.
Right. Okay.
In the capital city. I'm not talking about the countryside. Many people are using coal to cook.
That would have a negative health impact as well, breathing in the fumes of the coal. Yeah.
If you buy now, for example, I don't know, any frozen food, whatever, you need to be careful because it can be damaged. If you don't have electricity, you need to cook immediately, eat immediately or the next day, because probably in the following 24 hours that food is going to be damaged and you can be poisoned, intoxicated. So that's one thing. Also in terms of medicines, it's very difficult to live amid the lack of medicine that we are having. Cuba has developed a very strong pharmaceutical and biotechnological industry. But, I mean, we have the technology, we have the infrastructure for that, but we don't have the materials to produce those medicines, those pills. So if we don't have the components of the medicine, the pills,
right,
it's difficult to produce. We are not in condition to produce. If you go to Cuba and you visit, you can see it on Facebook. The pharmacies, they don't look like the pharmacies that we used to have 10 years ago. if not almost empty, they are closed. So this is the situation. You go to a hospital, and first you need to find a public transportation or a private transportation to go to the hospital. When you get to the hospital, and probably no electricity in the hospital. So our doctors, our medical personnel is working in a very brave conditions. They are more than doctors. They are heroes. Cuban health personnel, I consider them as heroes, because even in those conditions, they have the training based on the humanism of the Cuban Revolution. They have the training that the most important thing is to save a life.
Right. So there's an idea of social responsibility that comes with the education.
Exactly. So you go to a hospital and maybe there is no electricity. Maybe you don't have air conditioning, of course. Maybe you don't have even a fan. You can see Cuban doctors working and they are sweating.
Wow. I mean, the conditions that you are describing sound borderline, sound genocidal. And in fact, I think many commentators have started using that word, using that analogy, saying that this kind of suffocation, denial of people of basics like, fuel, medicine, which in turn leads to the collapse of the food system, is in fact is a genocidal act, right? It's collective punishment.
Yes.
I mean, would you agree with that assessment?
Of course. I am totally sure that all these sanctions have been, created with the main objective of not only suffocating the Cuban people, to destroy and defeat the Cuban Revolution as a project, as a social project, but in this 7 months, almost 8 months, it's been, strengthened. We call it the blockade, oh my God, I'm sorry. Recrudecimiento. It's been, I'm sorry, you have to edit this. The sanctions has been created to, based on the fact that the U.S. government knows the effect on the Cuban people. We have a phrase that we use, is like those sanctions were meticulous and surgically, like a doctor, surgically created.
Right.
They knew the impact in advance. They knew the impact of these sanctions on the Cuban people. Because as I told you, we've been there for more than 60 years. So it's like a different Americans, U.S. president, they have been trying different sanctions, different measures. And the revolution is still there. Cuban people is still
there. Yeah.
So now President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, it's like they are saying, well, we will do it. We will be recognized in history as the government, the U.S. government, who finally suffocated and defeated the Cuban Revolution. Also, there are other sanctions. For example, it's not only in fuel. The Cuban medical teams, based on the result and the recognition, international recognition of Cuban health system, Cuba has a program to export medical services. It is a program. And then the U.S. administration has been manipulating the issue very actively internationally. They have been manipulating the issue based on the idea that Cuba is exploiting the doctors, the Cuban doctors abroad. That the Cuban doctors abroad are treated as a slave. I mean, they are not working based on an agreement. No. They are a slave of the Cuban government. And this is also other surgical measure, sanction against Cuba. Because everybody knows that based on agreements, personal agreements, private agreements, and also intergovernmental agreements, these doctors constitute a source of incomes. This program constitute a source of income to Cuba. It's as normal as exporting medical services. This happens anywhere in the world. People export services countries export services that they have based on agreements. So it's quite normal. But then they are manipulating this. They have been using this as a weapon against the Cuban Revolution, the Cuban government. The U.S. has been forcing all the governments in third world countries,
particularly in the Caribbean, I believe, right?
Caribbean, Africa. They have been pushing them, suffocating them, trying that they terminate the contract with Cuba, knowing the dramatic impact that this is having in the Cuban economy. This is also the so-called list of nations, states sponsoring terrorism.
Terrorism, yeah. Very ironic coming from the United
Cuba,
States.
Cuba is a state sponsoring terrorism. Cuba is not a victim of terrorism for more than 60 years now. Cuba is a sponsor. So based on that, and if they promote through social media, through papers, newspaper, and so on, so if they promote that idea, there is a negative impact in other essential sector for the Cuban economy now, tourism.
Right, yeah. So another source of foreign currency revenue.
Exactly. That's also other surgical point in the sanction. They knew in advance that all these sanctions together fuel medical export of medical services, tourism. They knew that going against those pillars, there is no much space for Cuba to survive. So this is the reality now in Cuba.
No, I think it's very correct what you said also, that these are surgical and calculated to sort of create the maximum human cost on the target country. And the United States has a lot of experience with this, historically, I mean, right? So, after the Chinese Revolution, there was a great amount of sanctions and embargo on the Chinese. It was done towards the Vietnamese. More recently, it was done to Venezuela, right? Their ability to sell oil, right? Completely destroyed Venezuela's social programs that were built up by Chavez. It's been done to the Iranians for a very long time, right? They've used sanctions against Russia as well. The case of Cuba is, interesting, however, because it is much smaller than all of the countries I just mentioned, right? In terms of population, in terms of land mass. Yeah. It's not very rich in natural resources, but it is right next door to the United States. So, that leads me to the question of why Cuba, right? Why is there such a prolonged bipartisan hatred towards the Cuban Revolution? Why is it so essential that now, especially with all of the problems that the United States has domestically, right? Domestically, there are so many problems in the United States. Even the sort of national security strategy indicated that it was looking more towards, what they call the Monroe Doctrine, right? Donald Trump's version of the Monroe Doctrine, looking more towards the North and South American continent. Why is it so essential for the U.S., you think, to attack and crush the Cuban Revolution in this way?
Yes, that is a good question, because in diplomacy and as politicians, we always say that to really understand this bilateral conflict or relationship between the U.S. and Cuba, it is necessary to go to the history. Well, it's always necessary to go to history to understand the whatever is happening at current times. But there are two elements that are essentials to understand the conflict, the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba. The first one is the historical interest from the U.S. different government, historical for centuries, of dominating, mastering Cuba. Because of the geographical position of Cuba. Cuba is like, many people say Cuba is like the key of the Caribbean because of the position, geographical position. But compared to the U.S., it's 90 miles, 100 kilometers. It's nothing. You can make a bridge.
It's right next door.
You can make a bridge and you are already in Miami or in Key West. So losing the benefits of having not a colony, but a neo-colony, or having a dominated country, government and people so close, they lost that in 1959. That is something that they do not forgive to the Cuban Revolution and to Fidel Castro. They have always will to dominate Cuba, economically. Remember what I told you about the fuel and the sugarcane? Most of the sugarcane production went to the U.S., also from other countries, Dominican Republic and so on, but especially, we're talking about Cuba. Economically, politically, Cuban governments, Cuban presidents, Cuban governors, before 1959, were part of the U.S. government. They were linked, they were related, fully related. They respond to U.S. government. Military, we still have that naval base in Guantanamo. So this is the best example, that they recognize how important is Cuba for them, military. This naval base, as everybody knows, is still there, remains there, against the will of the Cuban people. This is other story. We can be talking about that for a long time. Also, I told you, economically, political, in diplomacy. Before 1959, Cuba at the United Nations, another international gathering, Cuba was never seen as an independent and sovereign state. Cuba was also dependent on doing what the master wants Cuban's government or representatives to say or to do. Legislative speaking, in parliamentary speaking, Cuban laws were always consulted. Okay, give me your opinion about this law. We have many examples in the history of Cuba about laws, acts that were passed by Cuban Congress in the past, and they all have spaces, articles, giving the U.S. government facilities to enter Cuba wherever they want, to do whatever they want. Right. We have a good example, Platt Amendment to the Constitution in 1902. Platt Amendment, thanks to Platt Amendment, is the naval base in Guantanamo still there. So Platt Amendment was something that was put in the Cuban Constitution.
Okay. So Cuba is basically treated all along as a vassal state, kind of. And there's this imperial arrogance where they still feel entitled to Cuban sovereignty, the Cuban landmass. Socially
speaking, Cuba was like a backyard of the U.S. in terms of prostitution.
Right. And there were strong links also with the criminal underworld of the U.S.
Exactly. Gambling.
Right.
They Americans used to travel to Cuba for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Prostitute, gambling,
Right.
invest money, clean. I mean, wash money, dirty money, coming from whatever narcotic. And so there are films that show us about mafia, U.S. mafia coming to Cuba to do business. So this was Cuba before 1959, and this is the first element. They do not forgive us, the Cuban government and the revolution. They do not forgive us to stop that. Stop that. This is enough.
Right.
Then, this is one element. The other element that is necessary to understand is the determination, solid and firm determination of the Cuban people, historically, not only the revolution, to be independent, sovereign, and free.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not talking about the revolution by Fidel, led by Fidel. I'm talking about the different independence wars that Cuban had.
A long
before.
legacy of national liberation struggles.
Exactly. There is a very strong union movement in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
The history is there. So Cubans, we never renounce, and we will not renounce, to be free, independent, sovereign. So that there you see the relationship. One side, they want to have Cuba back.
Right. Well,
Return.
they want to dominate, basically.
They want to dominate.
Right. It wouldn't be an issue if they wanted to cooperate, but they want to dominate.
No, they want to dominate. And the other side is Cuban, doesn't want to be dominated.
Mm.
We want to be free, independent, sovereign.
Right.
We have to be able to defend our voices, our principles internationally, the way we do, not from the perspective of a dominated country. It's too different. So it's important to understand this, because it's not a problem with the Cuban Revolution. It is an ideological problem that comes from centuries ago.
Right. Yeah.
So even without the revolution, Cuban people, Cuban social movement, Cuban unions, Cuban progressive forces, even without the revolution, they will be there fighting for the independence that we only got in 1959. So it is important to understand that, because some people see it only on the perspective of Fidel Castro and the revolution in 1959, and no.
Exactly, yeah.
You need to go back 2 centuries ago. They always wanted, and they dreamed, to have Cuba back. And it's not a problem of only a problem of the Cuban Americans. No, it's the American political system. Cuban Americans are not strong enough to establish the political system in the U.S.
Right.
Political system is something bigger, larger, stronger. So that is important. That is why it's so important to understand history.
That's a very good point, and actually brings me right back to Fidel. I mean, I look at things from a Marxist perspective, so I don't really believe that great men make history. I think it's the other way around, right? History makes great men at particular, ruptures, in particular conjunctures in time. And I think the way you explained it, it's very, very interesting that Fidel is also a culmination of this history of the Cuban people's struggle, right? It was the Cuban people's movement towards national liberation that produced a man like Fidel. He was sort of the manifestation of a social consciousness, if you will, right? And as that manifestation, he enabled the creation of all these institutions in Cuba, right? Institutions that produce people like you and people like your daughter. And institutions that also produce, I would say, a resilience that you would not see anywhere else in the world. Everything you described that Cuba is going through, I can't really think of any country that the social system, the political system would survive that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any country in the world that would really, survive that to the extent the Cubans have. Perhaps some of the other socialist countries like, Vietnam, China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, maybe come the closest. But, Cuba really stands out. And I think that resilience is also Fidel's legacy, I would say, right?
Yeah.
For the Cuban people, that you're still standing with that confidence.
Yes.
Right? And also, you were talking about, this idea of like national liberation and sovereignty, which feeds into the socialist idea as well, the new man and all of that. I think it's a good opportunity to dig a little deeper and think about what does Fidel mean to you as a Cuban person, as a diplomat, as someone who was also a beneficiary of that system that was created, the institutions created by Fidel. What does he mean to you today?
Well, it's a very sensitive question because it's difficult to answer in one or two words. Maybe I will use some adjectives how I feel. Fidel, more than a leader of the Cuban Revolution, the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, personally, Fidel was like a master, a professor, a teacher, someone that was guiding my life, our life, the life of a generation of Cubans. Is someone that we were so proud to have, as I mentioned before. Me, not only me as Patricia, me as a generation of Cubans, me as a generation of progressive persons in the world. When I say that we were lucky and proud to have someone like Fidel in our life, I'm not only talking about Cuba, I'm talking about Sri Lankans, I'm talking about progressive people in the U.S. Inside the U.S., there is a great movement in solidarity with Cuba. Even inside the Congress, they are divided, they are split because many of them disagree with this policy of sanctions against Cuba, the blockade. So even in Congress, there have been historically a huge debate about the policy to Cuba, about how to lift the blockade, how to stop, how to trade with Cuba, how to allow remittances, how to allow American people to travel. Fidel was, as I mentioned, a teacher, a master personally. And sometimes we underestimate because we were so used to have Fidel in our life. Now Fidel is there. If there was a hurricane, Fidel is there. If there was a military intervention, Bay of Pigs, Fidel was there. If there was a different difficult moment for Cuba, like a special period, for example, Fidel was there leading us. So it was like a confidence. It's someone that we trust, that I trust. Personally said, we will survive. There will be a solution. And we learn from that. I personally also learned from him this humanist concept that has marked my life as a person and as a professional. It's like to share or sharing what we have, not what we have left. It's something very linked with the Cuban medical services all over the world, the internationalism of Cuba, the humanism of Cuba. For example, Cuba at this moment, at this very difficult moment, this is just an example, there are many. Cuba maintained the scholarships program in different subjects, specifically medicine, for example. We have this Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina, Latin American School for Medicine.
Right.
We still have that school. We still have that project.
And these are for foreign students?
Foreign students.
Right. So you're still giving scholarships to foreign students in this difficult situation?
Exactly. This year, for example, I'm already working with the young student selected by the Sri Lankan government. That is, he's traveling to Cuba very soon.
Wow.
So even in these conditions, we are giving, we are sharing what we have, even when it is something small, even when it is not fancy, but we are sharing what we have. And this is something that I personally applicate or apply in my personal and professional life. Even in these conditions, this is also an example. In the Cuban daily life, I might not have at home, for example, sugar or salt, or I might have headache and I don't have the medicine. And I live in a building. I have a neighbor that we talk every day on the balcony. Hello, how are you? Good morning. Do you have coffee? I just made coffee. Take some coffee. And maybe I don't have a box of coffee or 3 packages of coffee. Maybe that was the only one. But I love to share with my neighbor. The same if I have a headache. Oh my God, I don't have the medicine. Please, do you have a medicine? Okay, take a paracetamol. So this is what I mean when I learn from Fidel. This sharing what we have, not what we have left. This is a principle of the Cuban socialist program. It is a principle of the Cuban foreign policy. So I'm giving you examples to see the dimension of this way of thinking that we learned from Fidel, the humanism of the Cuban Revolution. Also in the way of thinking, of analyzing the international relations. Now I'm talking to you professionally. These guidelines on how to understand the conflicts, the international conflicts, this idea of always going to history. If you need to understand what's happening now, whatever is happening now, go to history. In history, you can find many, many answers to understand the situation. This is also something I learned from him. Also being humble. I mean, as a human being, I'm humble because of my parents, actually, the education I got, but also because Fidel was a simple statesman, no fancy, no elegant suite, no jewels, simple. The most important thing that he had to give, his legacy is based on the his thoughts, his ideas. That's why we always say that we miss him. The reflections, the day-to-day reflection. This is happening. Fidel was a visionary. Analyzing the history and current situation at any moment, he was able to foresee what was coming, even when nobody knew. He said, if this happened, like the fall of the socialist community, if this happened, we will be here to resist. And this was that he defined was already coming. And he saw it probably before than many other people. This is the kind of thing. I personally feel very proud. I had the privilege to meet him a couple of times.
What was that like?
It was amazing. This is the kind of things that you, at the specific moment, you don't realize how important they could be for your life.
Right.
In that moment, I mean, you are having a conversation with someone of the statue of Fidel, and in that specific moment, you don't see the significance of that in your life, because you feel like he will be there forever. But then we go back, he was a human being. And then the most important event that I remember, chatting with him a little bit, It was 2002, December 2002. Around every year on the 8th of December, Cuba celebrates the CARICOM Summit. And that year, in Havana, I was working as the edecán or attaché for the St. Kitts and Nevis delegation. Mm-hmm. So I was, attaché. I was working with them, with the president or the prime minister, assisting on everything and so on. And then at the end of the summit, we were all at the airport, all the Cuban officials. We were at the airport, just in the farewell ceremonies for each delegation to return to their countries. And Fidel surprised us, all of us. That's a picture I shared yesterday, mm-hmm. and as a tribute to him. I shared that picture on Facebook. And he was there. Then there was someone who came to tell us, don't go. There is a surprise for all of you. Yeah. And then they told us that someone, and then we were standing there, all of us, all the Cuban staffers, and he came because he was also there to farewell, to say goodbye to the dignitaries from different countries. And then he was there, he came to each one of us and shared something with us. I remember something like, how was it? How was the experience? It was a good summit. Something like that, encouraging. And then one by one. And I am very proud to have that picture, not only the moment, but the picture. That is, eternal for me. It's something I remember very clear. I have also clear that emotion because working in that summit, I was already pregnant.
Oh.
So, feeling pregnant,
right.
It's like you feel tired or hungry or this or that. You need to follow a diet. But I forgot about everything. Camila, my daughter, was here. But in that moment, the most important thing was not if I was tired or the shoes. No. In that moment, you forget everything. You are just witnessing something, a special moment in your life for the history. You are in front of a leader. You are in front of someone that is going to transcend the history. And that's the only thing you think when you are having that experience. It was fantastic.
Wow.
I'm sorry, it was emotional for this question.
I'm emotional hearing the story. It's an incredible story. And, as you said, in the end, Fidel was just a man, but the ideals he represented are universal. And we are really privileged in the sense that he left so many speeches, so much writing, there's so much we can derive from his system of thinking, right? Yeah. From his thoughts. And I myself visit a lot of those writings often, right? To analyze the global economy, to analyze international relations. Such a sharp mind, right? A sort of a gift, I think, to the world. And it's a shame, really, because in the sort of mainstream education system, no one is telling you to read Fidel Castro for your international relations course. But perhaps in Cuba they do that, but definitely not in the rest of the sort of capitalist world, right? Mm-hmm. They might even tell you to read Henry Kissinger and all these crazy right-wing people. Mm-hmm. But there's so much more, especially in the global south, we can learn from Fidel. But I think something I take away from this conversation is that, it's true, Fidel is gone, but in a way, his universal ideas are still with us. And the battle of ideas, which he talked about, is a task that he has left to us to continue. His picture is right there behind you. In a way, he's standing behind you. He's standing behind me too, right?
Standing with us.
Exactly.
Guiding
he's standing
us.
with us. He's standing with us. So, the task is not complete. Yeah, there are so many tasks ahead of us. But I think on that note, Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure to hear about your story, to hear about, the Cuban people's struggle, your experiences with Fidel. I think it would be extremely educational for all of our viewers. Certainly was for me. So thank you once again for joining us.
No, it's been a pleasure. Let me just mention something else. Now that you talk about our duty to continue the battle of idea, this is, I see it like it is the responsibility of our generations to continue without Fidel physically with us. He's with us. He's present in every international event. Now in Havana, we are celebrating the first colloquium, international colloquium, Fidel Legacy and Future. We are gathering in Havana around 1,500 or 600, more or less, delegates from 50 or 60 countries. There is a delegation from Sri Lanka there also. So what I mean is that if we get together, if we unite, if we keep united, I mean, social movement, progressive and left forces, political parties, if we get united, we are in better condition to maintain the legacy of Fidel. Not only for being Fidel, because it is the legacy of his ideas that are now probably needed in the world more than ever. So this is something that we can transmit to new generations in the universities, in the schools. For me as ambassador, I always mention this, academic exchange and cultural exchange are a tool in my daily agenda. Because I see, and this is an example, we are talking about Fidel, but it is an example, as you mentioned, that it's difficult to find scholars or universities in the world that continue studying and researching about Fidel Castro. So this is probably the most important task that we have now. United to continue studying, to continue researching, to continue the legacy that he taught us. Thank you. I'm really thank you for the opportunity, for your patience.
Viva Fidel.
Viva, venceremos.
Venceremos.
Yes.
Viva Cuba.
Viva Cuba. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.